Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us once again for this Drawdown Georgia Climate interview series, where we are interviewing and speaking to so many amazing climate justice leaders here in the state of Georgia and highlighting the really great work that's happening in the state. I am really glad to be joined today by Brionté McCorkle. Brionté is the Executive Director of Georgia Conservation Voters. Thank you so much for joining me today, Brionté. It's really great to have you.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here. Thank you all for bringing me on.
Great. So we'll jump right in. Please introduce yourself to our audience and tell us what brought you to a career focused on climate and environmental justice.
So I'm Brionté McCorkle. I am currently the Executive Director of Georgia Conservation Voters, and I've been serving in this role since 2019. Moving to Georgia when I was really young, it opened my eyes to just how amazing the environment was. I had been living in the Mojave Desert on a military base, so my early childhood was sprinkler systems and sticks held up by, trees held up by sticks. And then I moved to Georgia and I was just really blown away by the thick landscape of trees. I'd never seen trees at that point that had not been supported by sprinkler systems and sticks to be able to live. And I'd never seen a forest, anything like a forest, except in textbooks up until that point. So it was really mind blowing for me to have that experience and go, wow, the world is a beautiful place and we need to protect it. And then fast forward to college, I, just like every young person trying to figure out what I was going to do with my life and what my passion and my purpose was, I went into school thinking I was going to be a corporate lawyer at one point. At one point, I thought I was going to be a certified registered nurse anesthetist, right? I was going to stick needles in people and make six figures a year. That was the plan. And then I took a political science class, and that class had lots of global issues. That was the particular focus of that course. And we were looking at things like education access, healthcare access, women's rights, and all sorts of big global issues impacting us today. And then we got to climate change, and that really just ignited a fire in me because I felt like this particular issue, the planet that we live on and how we sustain our civilization, how people live on the planet, is so fundamental, and it's very much at risk because of climate change. And all of these other things, healthcare access, women's rights, really take a back seat if the planet's systems are collapsing. So I wanted to make sure that we were fixing this problem so that we could focus on some of the other things that are also impacting humanity. And
Absolutely.
I've learned that it's all very connected anyway, right? You're not going to solve climate change without also tackling women's rights or healthcare access. They're all very deeply connected.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It seems like many of us started out thinking we were going to be lawyers, and then we were like, nope. So heard and agreed. Wonderful. Thank you so much for that insight into who you are. So tell us more about the work that you all do at Georgia Conservation Voters. Longstanding organization, gone through many iterations, as I'm well aware of. But as you said, you've been in the role for about 6 years. So tell us more about the work that you all do currently under your leadership at Georgia Conservation Voters and the issues your organization is focusing on the most right now.
Absolutely. So when I took the role in 2019, I had been coming from many different other climate and environmental organizations, some of which were state-based, some of which were national. I really was excited about the opportunity to be building power here within the state of Georgia, where I lived right here in my backyard, and specifically having an opportunity to make sure that equity, racial equity, justice, environmental justice, all of that was really centered in the work from day one. Most of the environmental organizations I had been a part of were on a journey to becoming more racially just, more inclusive, more equitable. And so it was an opportunity to have a blank slate and build an organization dedicated to climate and environmental work with those principles and values embedded from day one. And I feel like we've been able to really manifest that reality. We have an incredibly diverse team. And most importantly, our members and our supporters are incredibly diverse, and they're all over the state. We've got people from all racial backgrounds, all different age groups. And so one of the things that we do focus on is specifically building power with Black, Latino, Asian, Indigenous communities, young people under 40, and women. That's not to say we don't talk to anyone else, but we put a very intense focus on those particular demographics because when we're looking at who is most impacted by climate change and who is already impacted by some of the environmental injustices, air and water pollution, it typically tends to be those groups. And then when you start to assess who's concerned about the issue, they also rise to the front. Women, young people, people of color consistently report being concerned about climate, wanting our elected officials to do more at much higher rates than other demographics. And then the other thing is also when it comes to making change in the climate space, we need policy change. It is absolutely the most effective tool that we have to moving us from a fossil fuel polluting, carbon emitting society to one that is based on renewables, that's clean, that's healthy, that's abundant. You're going to need policy at every level, at the national level, at the state level, at the local level, in order to do that. And in order to make policy change, you do have to get involved in elections. And when we look at who's not participating consistently in democracy, it tends to be those groups as well. People of color, young people, women that do not have the highest turnout rates. So, and then the final thing is when we're looking at voting rights, when there are attempts to roll back somebody's access to the polls by implementing, various measures, identity signature match, things like that, those things tend to disproportionately impact that same group as well. So over and over, we kept seeing this demographic as like, okay, this is the group that we want to build power with. And I think we've done a really great job. And so we did some early assessment on what is impacting this group of people most. And like most of Americans, it is the cost of living. And then we look at what are the things contributing to high cost of living, and especially when it comes to our lens of climate and environment, energy really rose to the top of the list. People were consistently reporting trouble paying bills, keeping up with their utility bills in particular, and then also making very clear demonstration that their bills had been rising over time in many ways faster than inflation. And so we wanted to make sure that we were meeting community where they were at, but also meeting climate where it's at. And we know here in Georgia, energy is one of the top opportunities that we have for carbon emissions reductions, which is absolutely necessary to meet this climate moment. And so that's why we focus on energy. It's not the only thing that we focus on because organizing is core to who we are, which means that community sometimes wants to throw down on something super local. And we also want to be responsive when things pop up like the biolabs community fire that impacted half of the state, but especially, that Rockdale area. And so we support people with the other issues, but energy is our primary focus. And so we've been doing a lot of work in that space, both at the Public Service Commission and with electric membership co-ops throughout the state to get people more involved in energy decision making and pushing for what they would really like to see, which is more renewables and, of course, more affordable power bills.
I'm so glad you mentioned the biolab explosion. I live on that side of DeKalb County. So certainly something that I think about, especially with a child with asthma. And then also, what I really like about GCV is the reporting and the data. I think you all are one of the organizations that people come to that has that data, and the way that people are able to utilize that quantitative data in their advocacy, I think is really important. And while it's not the only thing that matters, it certainly helps us make our case when it comes to the work that needs to be done, both in energy justice and in environmental and climate justice. So I think that is one of the things that I really enjoy about the work that GCV puts out for the community and for the movement in general in the state.
Thank you.
Yeah. You talked about voting, you talked about kind of the ways in which people vote and why people vote the way that they do in the sense of what's most important to them. The Georgia Conservation Voters Education Fund was one of the inaugural recipients of the Drawdown Georgia Climate Solutions and Equity Grants, which I've been really privileged to be a part of. And some of that work was around some of your engagement in those areas. So tell our audience more about that work that you all did with that grant and how that has affected the larger image of the work that you all are doing at GCV in general.
Absolutely. So part of why we ended up focusing on energy was all the reasons I said before, but we knew it was important because Georgia Drawdown had produced this beautiful guide showing us those big areas of impact, energy being the highest. And so we knew we were onto something. And when we look at the energy landscape in Georgia, who's making decisions about energy, where our energy is coming from, how it gets distributed, all of the things that have to do with energy, where are those conversations really being had? And so the biggest place is the Georgia Public Service Commission because the largest energy generator in the state is Georgia Power. And a lot of their energy generation mix right now is very dependent on gas, coal, very, very expensive nuclear. We knew that we had to be at the Public Service Commission. And the deeper that we got in that work, we started to notice a disconnect when talking to community members about the work of the Public Service Commission, because even though they're elected statewide, their decisions most directly impact Georgia Power customers. So people that are paying Georgia Power bills, the Public Service Commission, when it's looking at rates or adding charges to bills, that's whose bills are most directly impacted. But you have this whole set of customers who are not directly paying Georgia Power. They have electric membership co-ops. That's who they pay. And so we knew that we had to do the work to meet the community where they're at, right? And if they're not Georgia Power customers, it's harder to have a conversation with them about the Public Service Commission. And so we wanted to talk to them about what was going on locally in their electric membership co-op. And so that was what the Drawdown grant supported, was our electric membership co-op organizing. Georgia has about 41 electric membership co-ops throughout the state. And so one of the first things that we did was map them all out and then figure out what are the things that we're looking for electric membership co-ops to do, right? We want them, they do have the ability to support local generation. So of course we want to see more clean energy deployment, more solar, more energy efficiency, more wind, more battery storage, microgrids, demand response. There's a whole set of renewable energy programs that electric membership co-ops could be adopting and moving forward within their service territory. And so we did some scoring on how they were performing on those measures. But then we also care a lot about civic participation, democracy, people being involved in the decisions that are being made that impact them on a daily basis. And so we also looked at how transparent these electric membership co-ops are. Are they publishing their annual meetings? Do people know that they have board members? Do people even know that they could run for the board? Because if you are a member owner, you do have the ability not only to vote for board members, but to run in those elections and to serve your EMC. And so we had that scorecard to really see which EMCs were performing the best. And, the news was that nobody got great scores. It was, I think the highest scores that we had were C's, mostly D's and some F's. And so we wanted to get this information out to community to say, you have this electric membership co-op. It is a democratic structure in the sense that you're a member owner and you have a vote in what this EMC is doing. This is what energy democracy looks like, for you to participate, for you to take leadership, and for you to, move your EMC in the direction that you want it to go, which is for more clean energy and for more affordable bills. And so we then identified a few electric membership co-ops where we would try to support members with engaging again in those annual meetings, but also running for those board seats. And so it's also about leadership development, empowering community members to not just participate in things, but also step up and take leadership. And so we formed the People Empowered for Clean Energy in Georgia committee. And so that is a group of EMC member owners who consistently get together to talk about what's happening within their EMCs, different opportunities to run for boards, different opportunities to push good policies forward. And that group continues to grow. We have member owners from lots of EMCs across the state. That was our organizing vehicle for this work. We did attempt to run a few candidates for board seats, and in the process, we learned a couple of things. First is it is difficult to qualify for some of these EMCs because you have to get a certain number of signatures. The timelines are pretty short. The election dates are all over the map. It's not like we're all going towards November. Some people have their annual meeting in April, some have it in October. So just like this, a lot of research has had to go into understanding how each EMC functions. They're all very different. What are the rules of engagement? What are the rules to qualify? What are the rules to run? And even what are the rules to vote? Because some of them, you have to go to a specific part of the county to vote on a specific day within a certain time window. So just being able to uncover that information and put it into a database so that in the future, it's easier the next time we decide to do it, really building some foundation again for that energy democracy that we need to function.
That's really great. And I remember doing some EMC work years ago, decades ago at this point. We have to remember that the way the EMCs were founded, they were founded in areas that used to be more rural. Some of which are, but most that used to be more rural and, are on the outskirts. And so it's so funny when we talk about how they are structured, because I think they were structured, not intended to service so many people. because of the way that, the area what used to be when they were originally formulated. And now that there's so many people, it's all the moving parts, and somewhat ad hoc in some ways, because there's a concentration of power in the ways in which the EMCs have run, just like in all other places in power structures. So that's really important work of that education that you all are doing for community to kind of show them how their money is being used in these ENC spaces. Do you feel like people understand the connection between Georgia Power and EMCs? And has that been a point of conversation when it comes to like the Public Service Commission? We talked about Public Service Commission and not voting. There is a connection, but as you said, it's not so direct. And how do you be able to break into that conversation with folks who are serviced by EMCs of why they should care about the PSC?
Yeah, absolutely. So you have to first meet people where they're at, right? You have to help them understand, okay, you're a member owner in this EMC, and this is what being a member owner is, and this is what your EMC could be doing, which goes back to the scorecard, right? It gives us a place to start a conversation with someone. Hey, look, your EMC has a C, and this is why, and helping them understand that. And so then we can start to talk about where their energy is coming from, right? The EMC either does or does not have generation. Some of them do have generation projects, some don't. And so, what does that look like? What are those clean energy projects? And then, well, where is the rest of the energy coming from? Well, these EMCs tend to buy their power wholesale from Oglethorpe Power, and they also buy their power wholesale from Georgia Power, right? And so, whatever Georgia Power is choosing for its energy generation mix does, eventually make its way into the EMC customer's home, because that EMC buys it wholesale. So we make sure that people understand that connection, that even if, you're not directly paying a Georgia Power bill, the Public Service Commission's decisions still impact you, because ultimately you're going to have to pick up the tab because your EMC is going to have to buy the power from that company at some point. So that is how we have that conversation. It's a lot of walking back, but in good organizing, that's what you do. You meet people where they're at, and then, help them as they move along in their leadership journey and their information journey to connecting all the dots. And so we think that it's really been important because, again, whether we're talking about EMCs or we're talking about Georgia Power and the Public Service Commission, where your energy is coming from, how much it costs is a really big conversation for people, especially given that the costs have gone up in the middle of this affordability crunch that everyone's feeling. And also, the other big trend impacting things is that their data centers are coming, right? Data centers are coming. Right. They're descending upon the state. There's so many different projects and proposals and permit requests for data centers to pop up. And so they're happening not just in Georgia Power Service territory. Some of these are popping up in EMCs, and people are like, wait a minute. This data center is huge, and they know that it's going to use a lot of electricity. It's also going to use potentially a lot of water. And so they're starting to ask questions about, well, how does this impact me? How does this impact my bill? Is my bill going to go up because this data center is being built down the street? And so it's just been really important and timely for us to be doing this work because while we're in this really intense moment for energy and electricity. I think that the decisions that are going to be made now are going to be lasting decisions for the next several decades, if not centuries. Our first coal-fired power plant was built over 100 years ago, right? And we're still living with that legacy. So this is a moment for us to have a different legacy and a really good time to engage people in a conversation that they've largely been left out of for a long time.
Absolutely. Thank you for that explanation. You mentioned before that you really appreciated some of the Drawdown Georgia resources. How else have the Drawdown Georgia resources and the framework of the 20 climate solutions supported or influenced GCV's work?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, energy is the big game. So we're all over that, but we are definitely looking at supporting other areas of work. We know that transportation is incredibly important. Actually, before I was here, transportation was like my main thing that I was doing, was trying to help expand public transit, walkability, bikeability in communities. And so the energy conversation is actually deeply connected to that too, right? Because the data centers in particular are bringing up how development happens in community, right? It happens super hyper locally. It's your city council, your county commission that is making the decisions about what your community looks like. And so, the more that we get people involved locally, the better, because then they can start to get involved in those other areas where, their county commission is making decisions about adding a tax to pay for more sidewalks or bike lanes, right? We can be involved in that and support community to organize in that. What comes to mind is we were doing some organizing in Cobb County and Gwinnett County around their efforts to expand transit. Ultimately, the transit referendums didn't succeed, but it was an important learning method for the community to understand that they need to be engaged locally, because those are where the decisions are being made that impact how their community looks and feels. One of the other areas that we would love to get more involved in is food and agriculture. We are a climate org, and when we're talking to people about these issues, usually food rises to the top of the list. People wanting to do more on composting, taking on vegan diets. And so we don't do a lot of work there, but it is something that our base is sort of excited about, and we're wanting to move into doing more to support them to organize around. And then I'll just say broadly, the ecosystem of partners in the Drawdown network is amazing. We work very closely with them through a coalition called the Georgians Organized to Survive and Thrive. So many Drawdown grantees are participating in that coalition space. It's the GHOST network, Georgians Organized to Survive and Thrive. And it's exciting because, each of us is doing a little different part of the work that's going to be necessary for us to make the change that we're looking for, right? Some people are involved in more legal strategies. Some people are doing work in the faith community. Some people are doing work on workforce development. So all of these things really add up and connect to being a movement towards the future that we want to see. And so I've just really been grateful to work with this network of partners. If we ever get stuck on something or we need support, we know we can reach out to the Drawdown team to help us accomplish what we've set out to accomplish.
That's great. I'm really glad to hear about that network. So that's really so necessary, especially for the moment that we're in. That's really pulling together. How can the Georgia climate community get involved? How can the folks that are passionate about climate get involved and help support the work that GCV is doing?
Absolutely. So I would say the first thing you do is go to our website if you haven't already, and then scroll down to the bottom, add your name to the form. You will get emails. And so that is one thing, but it'll help you stay up to date with all of the different activities that we're having. You could also alternatively just follow us on social media. We have Instagram, we have Facebook, we've got Blue Sky. Those are places that we're all actively posting. And so you'll be able to just see what we're up to in the different events that we have, because those are great places to come in and get connected to the work. We have lots of events focused on voter education. One potential opportunity, of course, is participating in our People Empowered for Clean Energy Committee, which specifically organizes around electric membership co-ops. You could get involved in our People's Power Union, which is specifically organizing at the Public Service Commission level. We also have different volunteer programs. Right now we have our GC Victory program. It's lots of young people who are trying to come in and get involved in the work that we do, specifically to help people get registered to vote and turn out to vote. So those are all really good organizing vehicles. And then, I am a nonprofit. So if you just want to throw a couple coins our way, we'll be happy to take that as well. You can go give at our website, gcvedfund.org, and give a donation to support the work if you can't come out and be actively involved. And sometimes we have online events as well. We just did a virtual happy hour with a lot of our communities so people could come in and get to know each other, even if they couldn't make it to the office physically. And so we'll be doing of that. But it's really about coming in, plugging in where you're interested in, meeting people, and being a part of a community of folks who really care about this issue, who are working really hard in lots of different ways to get involved. And again, we try to meet people where they're at. So we have people, for example, in our People's Power Union, who they come from the healthcare industry, right? So they take a lot of information and share a lot of information about their community, and they'll bring it back and they'll do outreach to their association as well about the work that we're doing. We've got people who just they take photos, right? And so how they help out is showing up, taking photos of the energy sites that we're working on, or just the community events that we're having, right? And that's just all to say that you have your own unique interests and your own unique skills. And so if you come in and you plug in and you tell us, hey, I really want to help, and this is what I'm really good at, I assure you we can find a way to put that skill to good use towards our mission.
Absolutely. Absolutely. They can access the resources like the scorecard and other things on you all's website, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have the EMC scorecard. It is on our website. You can get on there, click around, see how your EMC is doing. So you can definitely engage with that on the website. And then we have lots of other reports around energy issues in the state. We did 2 different reports on Plant Vogtle. We co-authored those reports with other organizations. So if you want to know more about nuclear in the state and specifically the Plant Vogtle project, we have information on that. We've sued specifically around the Public Service Commission to try to get some fairer elections. And so you can read more about that as well on the website. We've got a lot of really good information on the website if you want to hang out. And we got a blog, and we're telling stories as well about how climate and EJ issues are impacting people across Georgia. The first few stories were focused on the Inflation Reduction Act because Georgia is one of the top beneficiaries of the Inflation Reduction Act, billions of dollars in investment generated in the state. And even though the new administration has really pulled back and clawed back a lot of those investments, a lot of those projects remain in our state and are moving forward. And so we've told some stories about those projects and how they've impacted community as well. And so you can check out that information on our blog.
Wonderful. Awesome. Thank you so much again for being here. I have one more question for you. It's my favorite question. We ask all of our speakers. What is giving you hope around climate in Georgia? And I'll tack something on to yours as someone who works with voters. What message do you have for Georgians who feel hopeless and about climate and environmental justice right now?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I would say what gives me hope is that people are being a lot more honest about what the barriers are and the challenges have been to clean energy deployment, to voter turnout. I think for many years, there was sort of a hesitancy to just say the truth, right? About the reasons why people aren't voting or the reasons why clean energy isn't making progress. But what I've seen since November 2024 is a lot of really critical analysis about our strategy, our communication, who we're talking to, how we're talking to people, and a lot more willingness to be bold and try new things to engage people in this work and to make sure that they really understand what's at stake and what needs to be done. And so, I'm going to sound like such a nerd, but strategic planning is giving me hope.
Right.
Sort of through all the noise and figuring out like what that path is forward. And I've been involved in strategic planning conversations for my own organization, for national organizations, regional work. And so, yeah, it's just this newfound creativity that's rooted in this newfound willingness to be honest about what's working and what's not. And so I'm really hoping to see some new strategies and tactics really take off in the climate space over the next couple of years. I'll say one thing is we are doing this really cool project right now with influencers because we know people are on social media, they're watching TikTok, and they're listening to folks there, and that's where they're getting their information, they're getting their news. So we partnered with them to do some voter education, and they're getting millions of views, and we couldn't have done that on our own. And so again, would we have done that project had November 2024 not happened? Probably not, right? We probably would be doing the same old. So like looking at these new tactics and seeing that they're actually effective and they're taking off is just really exciting, and it's giving me a lot of hope. And hopefully it translates to more turnout at the polls in future elections.
And just the second part of that, like the hopelessness, you and I see a lot of people and work with a lot of people that are really doing the work and continuing to move forward with the work regardless, right?
Yeah.
But for folks that, I'm glad that you said something about messaging, because we've often heard that the climate movement doesn't have great messaging. Talked about that. And so, because it has not been our strong point. And so for the message for folks that understand and kind of see the forest for the trees and see the somewhat not impending doom, but some people feel that way. What is the message that you all have as you're in conversation with community? What is the message that you all have of kind of giving folks some of that hope that you feel yourself?
Yeah, that's actually a really good question. So I think one is like rooting ourselves in just the timeline of humanity, right? I mean, the climate crisis was not built overnight, and we built our entire civilization around fossil fuels, right? How we get to and from work and where our energy comes from, how we warm our homes up, how we power our society. I mean, where our food comes from. All these decisions have ultimately led us to a place where we are today, which is there's a lot of really good things, right? People generally have housing, they generally have energy access, they generally have access to food at a scale that just wasn't there before. But now we know how to do better. So this is our opportunity to do better, right? We know how to provide for ourselves without undermining our future because we're burning too much. We're putting too many carbon emissions in the air, or we're poisoning our air and water, right? What we've learned is you can't necessarily demonize the things that work to get us here. This is our opportunity to take what we've learned on how to do it better and build something new, right? This is an opportunity to create and to build the society that we want to see. And if we don't change the way that we are doing things, then the consequences are high bills, polluted air, polluted water, high, public health costs, right, in the form of asthma, extreme heat. So we're trying to be really clear with people about the impacts if we don't change, and that there is excitement in being able to co-create a new way of living on this planet. And I think that the other thing I will say about rooting in history is there's ups and downs, right? I know right now it feels like we're just in a hole that we're never climbing out of. But if you go back to, the civil rights movement before the Civil Rights Act passed, I mean, people also felt like that in that time period. Or if you go back to the Civil War, people also felt like that in that time period, right? There are times in history where things are dark and things don't feel good, but there's always this community of people that's keeping that drumbeat, that's keeping forward no matter what. Even if they know that they might not see the fruits of their labor, they are still doing that work. And so I think it's important that people understand that we've got to be those people, right? We've got to be the ones that keep that drumbeat moving, that keep us moving forward, even if things look dark. And even if we're not going to see the benefit, our children will. And that is worth everything that I'm doing now by myself with community through this organization. We have to keep that perspective. This is a long game.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. Those are really important words. And thank you just for being here and for sharing more about what you all do with Georgia Conservation Voters and what you're doing in that work. It's definitely an organization that's appreciated in this space. So thank you for joining us today, Brionté. I really appreciate having you, and it's been really insightful and valuable information shared. Thank you all so much once again for joining us for this Drawdown Georgia Climate Interview Series. We will be back again with another episode next time, and we hope to see you here once again. So thank you. Thanks again, Brionté.
Thanks. Appreciate it.